Hackney was the poorest place in the country throughout the 1990s, even in the early 2000s.
I recall that.
We will call that. At the poorest educational standards, it had poor health outcomes, it had high unemployment. The problem is that there was a very specific policy in the 1980s to effectively remove the state from developing or regenerating places, to strip the public sector of its powers and its ability to provide even very basic functions like housing for communities, because there was a perception that the private sector could do it better. Hackney Walk is probably the biggest example where, after the riots happened, we're going to put a fashion hub in Homerton of all places. But who's to buy what? Jay-Z was performing, and Jay-Z and Hackney, we would have been, it was crazy to think, but they really tried to promote Hackney to the wider world. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, they're going to really clamp down on us. Like, they put a lot of people in prison, tough sentences. Felt like, you young people that live here now, we're warning you now that this place, Hackney, that you once loved, you once enjoyed, it's not going to be yours for long. So what effectively happened is that when I was young, like when that incident happened, I was kind of getting up to the usual delinquency that you do get up to in Hackney, like knocking on people's doors, running away, throwing eggs and throwing fireworks on bonfire night. Someone approached me with a knife when I was about 14, 15. I think in this day and age, I feel like it's a little bit easier to get away from crime because the schools are so good now. Living in Hackney, and I talk about these stories like people like Idris Elba, Alan Sugar, Trevor Nelson, Julie Love, Barbara Windsor, all these different people. You can tell in their demeanour that growing up in Hackney just gives them that edge. But I really valued like hearing my mum and dad talk about Ghana, coming from a Ghanaian household, hearing Daddy Lumba every day. We always had a trade-off between being from Africa, which was only like kind of distant, versus the British life that you was facing and experiencing.
Hello, and welcome to Academy Magazine's Connecting Communities podcast, where we explore stories through a Ghanaian lens and dive into conversations with Ghanaians on topics including culture, the arts, and history. My name is Cameron, editor of Academy Magazine, and you have just been listening to excerpts from a conversation with Richard Yeboah, a lifelong Hackney resident and historian. Richard is also the author of From Hackney with Love, An Intimate History of Gentrification, published in May 2025. In our conversation in September 2025, Richard reflects on his experiences of living and growing up in Hackney and explores the social, political, and economic policies that have shaped the borough into what it is today. Richard also offers insight into his upbringing in a Ghanaian household and how he navigated life's challenges as a young boy growing up in Hackney in the early 2000s.